Soon I will embark on a massive undertaking, which is the new installment of my force assessment series that will focus on the United States air power. Some of the important groundwork has been accomplished through previous videos on this channel, and this video will continue to solidify the groundwork before diving into the main bulk of work. In this video, we will talk about missiles as currently they, along with tactical aircraft, dominate the discussion of current conflicts. In particular, we will discuss why China and to an extent Iran and North Korea focus so heavily on their missile stocks as compared to other military assets. The utility of missiles. Considering how important speed is in reducing the enemy's reaction time and denying them of counteraction opportunities, you'd think ballistics would be the main focus. Russia, for example, focuses on artillery to deliver the most combat value in a conflict, with other assets like tactical aircraft and tanks being utilized to protect that artillery. Tanks themselves much prefer the cannon over the missile, as the tank round will allow a vehicle to attack and retreat before an incoming missile can reach them. So why is there so much focus on such complex and expensive tools like the missile? Well, two reasons: range and precision. Nothing else offers the ability to reach out and touch someone like the missile. Ballistic projectiles have limited control and will only depreciate energy over time. They are dependent on the launching platform to impart the correct parameters at the moment of launch to hit the target. Even then, it's entirely possible, depending on the time it takes to reach the target, for the target to observe and react, ruining those initial launch parameters. Missiles are entirely different in that while they are still reliant on the launching platform to give good launching parameters, they are also able to correct to a far greater extent. And while a projectile immediately starts to degrade kinematically, missiles will usually achieve greater kinematic performance after launch within its flight time. Their controllability and the greater kinematic performance over time means they can attack with precision over extreme distances. While theoretically it's possible to launch a projectile across the Earth, it's far more practical to launch a missile to accomplish this task. Because of the missile, we've extended the range of air combat to extreme distances, and battlefields have increased from county-sized events to complex spaces that cover portions of the entire globe. For these reasons, missiles have come front and center as the weapon of choice in many aspects of modern combat. The missile threat. Right now, the United States is looking at the Pacific with North Korea and China, the Middle East with Iran, and Europe with Russia as areas of potential conflict. With the partial exception of Russia, all these potential adversaries focus on the procurement of missiles in order to achieve area denial. While Russia does devote resources to this domain with their ballistic missiles, and of course the large number of cruise missiles it's deployed over Ukraine. Again, the main focus is on their artillery and their army to cement control after bombardment. China, Iran, and North Korea focus on missile technology because the procurement of missiles has decreased in cost and the capabilities of missiles have only increased over time. Likewise, counter-missile operations are disproportionately complex that require extremely capable sensors, networking hardware, robust situational awareness, and fast reaction times. That of course also dramatically increase costs, which leads to situations where advanced systems are countered simply through saturation attacks with extremely low-cost, low-capability missiles. China is all in. In my previous video, we've focused on the Air Force while touching on other branches towards the end. The Air Force has fundamentally transformed itself from a 1960s Air Force to a modern 21st century Air Force in the span of about 20 years. This is also true of the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force. The PLARF entered the millennium with the DF-4 intercontinental ballistic missile. The DF-4 is a liquid fuel missile that is deployed from silos in caves. The liquid fuel motor means that the response time is likely hours long. The guidance system isn't particularly good either, with a CEP of about 1500 meters or so. Now we're looking at advanced systems like the DF-21 hypersonic glide vehicles and solid fuel rolled mobile ballistic missiles with some 8,000 miles of range. The Chinese Communist Party has been rapidly expanding the rocket force with ever-increasing stockpiles. Even now there's evidence to suggest that new nuclear silos are being built, which implies an expansion to the nuclear capability that's been rather dormant for a long time. With missile defense involving so much technological investment to achieve the complex skill chains required, the ever-expanding rocket force represents an avenue for China to develop a massive destructive capability for relatively low cost per unit. The opening moments of a conflict would see a massive onslaught of missiles to overwhelm the enemy and destroy key infrastructure. The missiles can theoretically achieve significant strategic effect in the opening stages, though as stockpiles deplete, the worth of the rocket force would diminish as well, placing more emphasis on traditional military branches. The US is unprepared. The United States has operated in theaters that are considered permissive in nature since the turn of the millennium. Despite this, the US Air Force has been struggling to maintain their fleets while contending with an unsustainable operational tempo that's been combined with a budget that's been diminishing since the end of the Cold War. These two factors have caused the United States to focus on consolidating their forces to as few locations as possible to increase efficiency, therefore freeing up funds for other aircraft. These handful of airports have been described as sanctuaries for warfighters. However, these conflicts didn't involve any significant missile encounters, which meant the risk was rather small, hence why these conflicts were deemed permissive. In the event the US were to enter a conflict with a near peer, this methodology fundamentally would not work, as such concentration of assets would be an enabling factor for an adversary to conduct saturation attacks. To combat this problem, the United States Air Force has been looking into extending the range of aircraft by establishing robust logistical trains to get aircraft from Guam to the Pacific Theater. This helps to mitigate to an extent by limiting the number of missiles that can cross that range, as well as extending the reaction time to combat any incoming missiles. That being said, the island is still within range of offensive weapons, which does not bode well for air bases in Japan or South Korea. There seems to have been a realization of this issue by high-ranking officials, as the United States is finally looking into asset dispersal. Asset dispersal degrades the effective missiles by increasing the amount of redundancy available. This means if a missile takes a runway offline for a day, units at other airports can continue to operate, diminishing the effectiveness of that missile. To this extent, F-16s and F-35s have been deployed to the North Airfield in Guam that's been abandoned since the 50s. Raptors recently have also been deployed to Saipan, and there is a massive expansion planned for Tinian. For a few years, there has also been a program known as Agile that seeks to deploy units in a way that maximizes dispersal. The biggest concern. The biggest concern for the United States Air Force, ironically, is the Army. The Army is tasked with ground-based air defense using systems such as the Terminal High Altitude Air Defense or THAAD system and the Shorter Range Patriot system. Unfortunately, units tasked with airspace defense are overwhelmed, with 80% being deployed for longer than average tours, even during the peacetime that the United States is currently experiencing. Ultimately, their resources for comprehensive missile defense just isn't there. On the Navy side, things are better to an extent. The Aegis system is a suite of sensors that are typically mounted on combat ships, but also have a land-based system as well. The number of ships operated by the United States and Japan helps in missile defense, but again it does come down to numbers, as China has thousands of missiles, as well as hundreds of armed aircraft that will also have to be contended with. This does not bode well for America's smallest Navy and Air Force since the Second World War. Conclusions. I mentioned in my assessment of China that after the initial Taiwan invasion, China would have to contend with a rallying US-led coalition. China in this stage would still likely cause massive amounts of damage to this coalition, though likely wouldn't achieve long-term victory. The fixed-wing aircraft capability is just one reason for this assessment. The other reason for this assessment is China's missile capability and the extensive stockpiles they've manufactured. However, it's a long-term prospect that doesn't bode well for China if a conflict were to break out. The occupation of an island with millions of people is a monumental task. China's ability to conduct post-invasion counterinsurgency operations will be tested, while simultaneously be a constant drain on resources. An unknown variable is China's ability to maintain its military force during a combat situation. Immediately, China would be cut off from resources and will have to be able to maintain equipment while under constant stress. Finally, there's the economic factors that are already not panning out for China, as its reliance on globalization has proved to be a double-edged sword right now. Globalization brought up China from poverty, but unless it can transition its economy, then the deterioration of globalization will cause China to return to poverty. As it stands right now, war with China would be a very rapid and destructive event that would change the geopolitical situation as we know it to an extent that is unrecognizable. Already we're seeing the breakdown of the homogeneous world order, as it's existed during the later half of the previous century, going into this millennium. A Pacific War would cause this long-term trend to occur essentially overnight. The sudden onset of chaos would absolutely destroy pre-established shipping routes, leading to an immediate destabilization of the entire developed world. I cannot predict how well different countries can cope with such a reality, nor how badly some countries will be affected. Ultimately, stability is the core requirement for economic prosperity, however, and this war would immediately dissolve that. Thank you for watching. This channel seeks to cut through sensationalist, biased reporting and present complex aviation topics to the average viewer in a way that's understandable and informative. If you like this content, please subscribe. Until the next video, keep looking up.